it's easy to stay motivated when, you're the first one back from the land nav course, or the first one that finishes the rep, because like you're staying motivated. It's like I'm on top of this. But like when everything hurts and everything's falling apart and everything is not going the way it's supposed to, those are the moments that it's hard to stay motivated. And so I try not to stay reliant on motivation, but rather it's just like, all right, I just have to stay consistent. Consistency will carry me through to the end.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Casazza, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a SEAL, and today's guest served for 10 years as a Green Beret. Before he was a Green Beret, he was a Frisbee golf instructor. I have to put that in there because you just don't come across that very often. He was a medic in Special Forces, and today he owns his own company called Top Tier Performance Coaching, where he helps others achieve success in their lives. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to Chris Lee. Chris, thank you so much for being on my podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you. So you're the second Green Beret that I have had on this show, and you're probably the first person I've ever come across that's been a Frisbee. I mean, I've met some golf instructors, but a Frisbee instructor, I didn't even know that was a thing. So I want to ask you some questions.
Sure.
You became a Green Beret you decided to become a Green Beret at 28. So which is very late in the game compared to other people, correct?
Yeah, that's what they kept telling me. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a pretty big jump from, Frisbee golf instructor to Green Beret. And you spent a year training, right, before you were going to go on track and stuff. So I want to know, how do you go from a job? I don't know what it's like to be a Frisbee golf instructor, but it sounds like it's fun and light, as I could say,
Sure.
Compared to Special Forces, combat. So what I want to know is, what made you make that jump, and what was, when you did decide to do that, how did you create a training program for yourself to prepare for it?
Right. So my time playing Frisbee golf, so some of that was bleed over from college. I played a lot of ultimate Frisbee in college, and but anyway, so I happened to be working at this fancy hotel in Virginia, and my job, to include other things, was teach little kids how to play Frisbee golf, but also roast them marshmallows on the weekends and get people's dinner reservations straight. And it was a relatively cush job. And the management there was starting to kind of steer me towards more of like a managerial position within that department. And I would have had a probably pretty comfortable life moving up the ranks within that organization. But that's why I decided I didn't want to do it. The biggest reason I decided to join the Army and ultimately become a Green Beret was because I wanted to pursue something where success was not guaranteed. I desperately wanted to chase after something where I could give absolutely everything I could and still come up short. A lot of it had to do with, I wanted to see what I had in me. Do I have what it takes to chase after something excellent? Well,
so you say something really interesting. You said, where success isn't guaranteed.
Right.
So what made you do Special Forces? Because being an author and being successful isn't guaranteed. Being an entrepreneur and having a business, I just believe anything, and we're going to get to, this is going to segue into another question of yours, but I feel like nothing is guaranteed. So what made you go right to Special Forces?
You're right. Not everything is guaranteed success. I could see, though, the trajectory of the life that I was living it would be very comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, maybe I got scared of that. I got scared of being potentially comfortable for the rest of my life, and then always looking back and wondering what if,
Mm-hmm.
So Special Forces, I actually don't tell anybody, but I went to the Marines first
Oh,
and and tried to enlist with them. And they told me kind of what you had mentioned, it's like it's a little late in the game for you, buddy. And I was like, oh, okay. So I looked around, talked to the Army recruiters. They told me about, an 18 X-ray contract, which just means as a civilian, you can enlist in the Army, go through basic training, and then have an opportunity to try out. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want. It didn't quite pan out that way due to like a knee surgery I had when I was a kid. It it excluded me from any kind of contract like that. I couldn't get like an airborne contract. So I enlisted as an 11 Bravo, which is just an infantryman. And that was a wild ride during basic training. But while I was at basic, some SF recruiters approached me and several others and said, "Hey, would you guys like to try out?" Yep. Where do I put my name? And kind of the rest is history from there. It's from there it was airborne school and then selection and then the Q course, which was a behemoth.
so I want to back up on that because I was going
Sure.
to segue into the fact that you then were going to go on this track and then you found out you couldn't do it because of your knee.
Right. Right.
So, okay, I'm going to back up to a year. You've been training for a year,
Yeah.
correct? So
Correct.
tell me about that. Like you're training yourself, how are you showing up for yourself every day? How are you putting in the work? What are you doing?
Right. A lot of it was just random. I due to the job that I was still working, I had a lot of time to like explore the internet and try to download various workout regimens and that type of thing. And so I was just kind of trying to glean as much information as I could in regards to just getting in shape. Because I was a relatively lean guy, but I wasn't good at working out. Working out is a skill that needs to be developed. And so my plan was just go to the gym every day and move things around, and hopefully that makes me stronger and faster and better. And it wasn't until I started documenting each of my workouts. So I started carrying around a big notebook and I wrote down every exercise, every number of sets, number of reps, how much sleep I had that night, what I ate that day. Like all encompassing my fitness journey was now documented in paper. And it wasn't until then that I started to actually see progress, because then I could actually look back and say, oh, well, on this particular exercise, I did this many reps on the fourth set or whatever. I'm going to push a little harder. And that was actually one of the biggest aha moments in my fitness journey is like, oh, I need to probably keep track of all of this. And that's when my exercise and fitness started to get more regimented and more dialed in. And so now I was training pretty heavily for cardio. So I was running all the time, which I absolutely hate running. And uh, I was pushing a lot towards like muscular endurance as opposed to just becoming a beefcake. So it was more lighter weight, higher reps, and a lot of calisthenics. So lots of push-ups and sit-ups and air squats and that type of thing. Pull-ups were my favorite. And so ultimately I was starting to lean out, but also like my musculature became a little bit more endurance oriented as opposed to, like I said, just try to put on mass.
It takes a lot of discipline to show up for yourself every single day. And what you're, to also do something that you hate, as like running,
Right.
which I can relate, is a struggle,
Yeah.
and discipline, I believe, is a skill. And so where did this skill come from? Because it sounds like you were extremely disciplined from the moment you started training, and maybe you weren't. Maybe you had some days where you didn't go to the gym or you didn't show up for yourself, but I don't know. But what I want to know is like, how did you train yourself to be that disciplined before you even got, into training?
If I look back through like the journal that I was keeping kind of amidst that time, the common theme in those pages was the wars against mediocrity, the wars against being average. I was so afraid of just being a regular guy. That's actually one of the components to like me showing up every day in the gym. The other part of it is kind of what we had discussed is like success isn't guaranteed on this path. I want to be a Green Beret, which means I need to work harder than I think I need to. And so, you know, admittedly, a lot of my journey early on was fear based, fear of being mediocre, fear of not making it through selection or the Q course, fear of not living out my dream. And so that pushed me to show up every day in the gym and push my body and mind further than I thought I could. And ultimately it paid off.
So you worked this hard for a year. You did stuff that you absolutely hated. You showed up for yourself every day.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you get told that it's not possible.
Right.
So I want to know, like, how crushed were you? And then like what ultimately, like, I know you got this option to like go basic, but like,
Sure.
I mean, going from where you wanted to be, getting that I want to know, like, what was going on when that happened.
Right. At that point, I was at MEPS, which was where all Army folks go to do their initial physical and that type of thing. And I remember going in for the final interview with the head doctor, and he was very scowl like and just very serious. And I was like, I don't want to talk to that guy. Like, give me the nice looking one over there. But of course, I got the kind of the mean mugging one, and he brought me into his office and he sat me down and he asked, like, what would you like to do in the Army? I was like, well, I want to be special forces. And he immediately lightened up. He's like, oh, this is awesome. I got to work with those guys. They're really cool. Oh man, best of luck to you. Oh, this is so great. He starts flipping through my medical record, and he's like, oh wait, hold on a second. And he walks over to a shelf on his a bookshelf in his office, pulls out this big book and flips it open, and he reads down and he's like, oh no, i'm I'm really sorry, but this regulation right here says that because you had part of your meniscus removed in your knee, it excludes you from any kind of airborne contract. And I was like, doc, what does that mean? He's like, well, I can't give you the special forces contract right here. Oh, well, now what do I do? It's like, well, you can still join the Army, you just can't do this. And again, yeah, just crushed. Just like I'd worked pretty hard to get to where this was supposed to go. And I remember I walked out to my recruiter. I was like, hey man, and full disclosure, I had the best recruiter in the world. He's the most honest, like straightforward. He Recruiters get a bad rap, but he was solid. But anyway, I laid it out to him. I was like, hey, this is what the doc said. I'm not able to get this X-ray contract, this 18 X-ray contract. What do I do? And he says, well, Chris, this is a bit of a gamble, but you could enlist just as an 11 Bravo, and maybe if you get lucky, you could pick up a special forces contract at basic. And I thought for a second, and I was like, all right, let's go for it. At that point, I had already mentally gone through the process of enlisting. Like I was ready to go. I trained up. I was ready to do this thing. There's just this one component that I had zero control over, which was that particular contract. And he said that there was a chance I could pick it up at basic. And so I kind of rolled the dice and tried to figure out what would happen, and it kind of worked out.
What was going on in your mind, like in terms of the fact that you just had to leave it up to chance? You had to gamble. Like it's completely out of your control. And
Right.
that is like, oh gosh. In my mind, I'm always like, how can I figure out how to make this work? How can
Right.
whose butt do I have to kiss to get me where I need to go? So were you
Right.
just like was any of that you, or you were just like, I'm just gonna go through it and see what happens?
I'm not a huge fan of leaving it up to the universe to figure out my life.
Yeah.
I'm much more interested in making my own luck, which is why I worked kind of the way I did leading up to that point. I wanted to make sure that I was ready. And so when I was faced with this position of like, all right, there's this one component that you have zero control over. It might not work out. I didn't like it at all. I like being kind of in control of my destiny. But sometimes like that's just not the way it pans out. And so sometimes the right answer is trust your gut and roll the dice and see what happens. And for me, it worked out.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by my absolute favorite company. If you know me or seen videos or photos of me, then you know I always have one on my wrist. I absolutely adore this company, DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com is the world's first smart crystal bracelet. Every single bracelet is handmade in the USA using real genuine crystals made on memory wire. Every bracelet is unisex and they're also aromatherapy. The cool part is the black onyx charm that is on the bracelet. It scans to your cell phone, connecting you to their Wellness Hub Elevate. You can also access their Wellness Hub Elevate on your computer or tablet. You just have to sign into your account. The bracelet gives you a 12-month membership. It has over 200 pieces of self-care content, from motivational tips, meditations, breathing exercises, exercises around the theme of your bracelet, printable journals, and so much more. The content is ever growing. And that's not all. The bracelet also gives you lifetime access to their Elevate Together Club, which meets monthly via Zoom. Each month is themed to give you actionable takeaways to elevate your life. And with this podcast episode, you get 40% off your purchase order by using the code Mindset Podcast. Use that code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Just go to DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com, code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Get your bracelet today. So did they know, like, when you went to basic, like they knew like you were working towards that? Like, how'd they pick you out? Like when you were in basic and then they called you?
I think part of it is I'm not sure exactly how the drill sergeants communicate with anything else, but I think they had like my PT records and then also some like aptitude scores leading up. Like everybody has to take the ASVAB before they go into any branch of the military, and that tests your ability to think in different ways. And so based on, I think, that score and then also my PT score, that's what ultimately brought the SF recruiters around to ask if I would want to try out.
So it was your training. It was the fact that you showed up for yourself every single day and you got there. Right. And I think that's a really important like lesson, because the gym is one of those things that doesn't give you that instant gratification. You know, you go to the gym, you work out, and you're not seeing the results right away. You're not seeing that muscle. You're not seeing like the mile on your time get shorter, you know, right away. And the fact that, you know, that really paid off, it's not something that you can really appreciate and understand until you like look back on it and you're like, oh, thank God I showed up for myself.
Right.
Did you feel that?
There was a sense of relief when those recruiters offered me the opportunity to try out. But I also knew that being given the opportunity to try out doesn't mean anything. It just means I can try out. And I knew I had the rest of basic training to get through. I had to get through airborne school without breaking a limb. And then I get to go to selection and see if I have what it takes. For me, that piece of paper saying that, yes, they recognize that I'm being given an opportunity. For me, that was just like the door opening it up. And I knew I still had a lot of work to do to stay prepared for selection as it rolled around. But you're right. Gym work is one of those things where it's like you don't see the payoff until like months or maybe even years down the road. And that can be frustrating, particularly in kind of today's culture and society where, you know, we want everything right now.
Yeah. Thanks, Amazon. My question for you then is, as you like got through the door, how did you continue with giving yourself the best chance to make it through?
You don't have a whole lot of control over anything at basic training. And so for that, a lot of that process, I was just riding that wave. They tell you when to eat, when to sleep, when to work out, when to, be disciplined. and, and so a lot of that was just like, all right, I kind of tossed my hands up. It's like, this is my process. I just have to ride this wave. And then once I graduated and then went on to airborne school, it was like, all right, just stay the course, stay in shape, keep working out on your own. Don't get hurt when you do jump. And I was fortunate enough not to get injured. And then after that, it was like, okay, yeah, we still got to stay with the process, because the goal isn't just to get to selection. The goal is to pass and then get through the Q course and then get on the teams. And that's years down the road. And so having that desired end state that was way far away, I understood that it's going to take, diligent effort. And interestingly, one of the best pieces of advice I actually got at selection, and I've kept it with me till today. One of the cadres sat us all down. This is after like a really long team event or something like that. And he's like, listen up, men, everyone's going to have a bad day. The trick is to have more good days than bad. And for me, that clicked. And that's what kind of helped carry me through the Q course. The Q course was 3 years for me. And so it's hard to show up every day and be perfect for 3 years. But if you can acknowledge that some days are going to be better than others, that understanding can help you kind of mold your process and say, all right, today's just a bad day. Tomorrow's going to be better. And then I'm just going to accumulate more good days than bad. And hopefully that'll be enough.
Now, it was 3 years for you because you were going in for a medic, so that's an extra 9 months. Is that correct?
Correct.
So sorry, continue.
Yeah, I was after selection. I was just happy that they said yes, you were selected, and so I wanted to be an engineer because I think blowing things up sounds like a lot of fun. But they were like, nope, you need to go be a medic. Okay, Roger that. Yeah, whatever you tell me. I'm happy to be here. Thanks. um, but but yeah, the medic course, special operations combat medic course, tacks on at least an extra 9 months. And that's if you don't have any recycles or issues like injury or anything like that. So yeah, by the time I wrapped up my medical training, a lot of the guys that I'd gone through selection with were more than halfway done with the Q course itself. And it was like, man, I'm just getting started now. So I had to then re-engage and just stay motivated. But yeah, it was 3 years for the Q course.
What you said, one of the key things that always stuck with you is, everyone's going to have a bad day, but you want to have more good days than bad days. Was within those 3 years, what was I guess the biggest struggle for you, like that, or what area that you weren't so strong in that was causing those bad days? And were there ever any moments where you were like, were you really questioned this, or you were unsure if, or wanted to quit or anything like that?
I would say the hardest part of the Q course is the Q course itself, the duration, because it's not a quick process. Even if you aren't a medic, it's still 2 years of your life. You have to show up every day and be excellent, which can be daunting. So in my opinion, the marathon that is the Q course is the hardest part. Now, if I had to pull out certain aspects of that, it's often things that are outside our control. I actually really enjoy land navigation. I enjoy kind of being out in the woods by myself, kind of in charge of my own destiny in that regard. But there was one section of the Q course where we were doing a land navigation event, and I was on the struggle bus. The weather just wasn't cooperating. I was just poopy faced, starting to feel sorry for myself. At one point, I had lost my map, and I was just like, "Oh, geez, I'm in trouble." And so it's those like tiny moments where it's like nothing's quite working out that you still got to like push through and keep driving on. That's kind of, I think, in my opinion, the real test of character, the real test of how bad do you want it. When nothing is working right, even if you're doing everything you're supposed to, and it's all falling apart. It's easy to stay motivated when you know you're the first one back from the land nav course or the first one that finishes the ruck because like you're staying motivated. It's like I'm on top of this. But like when everything hurts and everything's falling apart and everything is not going the way it's supposed to, those are the moments that it's hard to stay motivated. And so I try not to stay reliant on motivation, but rather it's just like, all right, I just have to stay consistent. Consistency will carry me through to the end. Motivation is fickle.
So we're gonna go to that bad day of land nav where you like weather was terrible. What kind of weather
Yeah. It was just dumping rain on us. And
was it? Cold?
it was pretty chilly. If I remember right, it was I want to say, late winter, early spring for Camp McCall area. So yeah, it was cold, wet. Nothing is fun when it's raining outside. Particularly when you're carrying a heavy ruck, it just gets heavier and heavier because it just soaks up that water.
Oh
It's-
yeah, yeah. I remember in training, like the worst part was when we would go in the ocean with everything on, the boots and
right.
everything, and then we'd have to go for a run on the dry sand. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't have anything on my back. Like, imagine if I had something on my back. Like, I'm struggling with just this, like these pants and these boots with sand in them.
Yeah.
So I slightly can relate to that. So then then you're by yourself, right? During the
Mhm.
story that we're telling. Okay.
Correct.
So you're by yourself too, which really can get you into that like self-loathing, like,
Yeah.
period in your head. Then you lose your map, right? And it's like,
Oh,
so how did you get to the end of that? And how did you like turn it around? Or did you turn it around? Did you just stay in the suck?
yeah. In that particular instance, it was just tired. It's towards the end of the iteration, so you're running out of time. I know I don't have enough points. I remember I just gotten to a point and started walking away, and I'm trying to run through the woods with this pack on, and then I reached down into my pocket where I kept my map and stuff, and it just wasn't there. And just the panic that went through my body, it was like, oh no, please no. and and so I immediately turned around and started to retrace my steps and try to find that darn map. And of course, it vaporized. It was like it never existed. The draws of North Carolina just ate it. And so for me, the hardest part wasn't losing the map. It was like once the exercise was over, not only did I not get enough points, but I had to tell my cadre, I I don't have my map. And of course, he just cusses me out and is like, "You're such a loser," or whatever. And rightfully so. Keep track of your equipment. And so, unfortunately, I had to redo that exercise. And so the next time we were doing that particular land nav exercise was in 5 or 6 weeks. So I had to essentially recycle to the next class. And I wasn't the only one. There's quite a few that were on the struggle bus during that period. But it was tough because walking through the woods at night and you're tired and everything hurts and you start asking yourself, particularly when you're alone, you're like, how bad do I want this? Like, is this goal really worth all of this silliness? I could, if I were to quit, I could just go to a regular unit, have a more maybe steady lifestyle for the next several years, and everything would be fine. Nobody would think less of me. But yeah, quitting wasn't an option. Like I always shook that thought off and then started running, almost to outrun that scary negative thought, to keep going, because it was worth it. It was worth it in the end to go through all that silliness.
I always find when that moment of quit goes into your mind, like it feels really good. Like you're like, this
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
really good. Like, just like end it, end the pain, end the suffering, like end it. Our brain doesn't like us doing hard things, like
right.
It just wants to keep us safe, and I'm ready to go there. But it's that sitting there and realizing like I quit on myself. Like I could have kept going, and like the quit sounds so good in that moment.
Right.
But then it will eat at me. Like
Oh yeah.
it'll like there are still some things like when I was running in training and then I like stopped and walked, that's still eating at me. It's like that was 3 years ago. Like move on, but especially like when
Yeah.
you're by yourself and you're working on pushing yourself, like I don't know about you, but like for me, I'm a bit softer on myself than if I had someone to compete with because I want to
Oh
win
yeah.
when there's someone else.
Right.
And it's like me versus me, like I could be better, by doing like one extra push-up. But if I had someone next to me who's doing like 10 extra push-ups, like I want to do 20. So it's like
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
easier, in my opinion, to quit on yourself. But then yeah, no one's gonna think lesser of you, but to me, I would. Like I'd be like, I
Right.
could have done that. Did you have like some moment? Well, what I wanted to ask you too was there ever moments like if you didn't make it through that, so you got rolled back in that land
Mhm.
nav, was there ever any moments where like if you didn't complete this, you would have been out?
Um,
Where there's pressure like that, and then the extra pressure
sure.
that you put on yourself?
Yeah, most things or most phases in the Q course, at least what I went through, if you failed one time, they give you another shot, unless it was like a completely egregious, like horrible thing that you did to fail. Typically, the Army is kind of that way. It's like, all right, you failed once, we'll give you another shot. Failed twice, all right, you're out. That was the only time I rolled back on anything. Even like the medical training, they tell you, okay, a third of you are gonna just not make it, a third of you are gonna do an academic recycle at some point, and then maybe a third of you will get through all the way on your first shot. And I was fortunate enough myself and a couple of my close buddies, we got through on our first shot through that with no academic recycle through the
Well, I
medical training. So we
want
were,
to I want to ask you something based off what you
yeah.
just said. You said three different things. One thing was, one third of you won't make it. Was that mean like you won't become a Green Beret at all?
Uh,
Um,
for for SOCM for the medical stuff, it was more like, all right, if you're the third that don't have what it takes to be a medic, we might bump you to a different MOS, like maybe
okay.
the weapons guy, or the commo guy, the engineer. There was, I did hear about this one guy who's like, hey, I just don't think this medic thing's for me. Told the cadre that, and they're like, okay, sweet. And then he was on a plane to Alaska in a month, just dropped from the Q course and was like, all right, you're out. So like you got to be careful with what you say and how you
Yeah.
present yourself. So in my opinion, medics have the best job on the team once they're there. Their Q course is a little bit harder, or a little bit longer. But once they're on the team, it's the best job ever. And so I was super grateful that I got to be a medic. I don't think I would have enjoyed like being a commo guy or anything like that. But yeah, so the Q course and Army in general, typically it's like if you mess up something, they give you a retry. And if you don't make the retry, then you're done. Go, it's needs of the Army. Go work at the 82nd Airborne or something like that.
So what was going on through your mind the second time? Did you like have pressure on yourself that you put, or you were just
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
yeah, what was going on? How'd you get through that? What was
The
the
prep,
weather like? Was it more, you had your map the whole time, right?
right, right. I what was frustrating is like I'm actually pretty good at land nav, and I chalk it up primarily because I'm not very good at directions. And so that forces me to rely so heavily on my equipment. I trust my compass. I don't trust this feeling like, yes, that way is north. I trust my equipment. I trust my compass. I trust my map. I trust my protractor. And so I was actually really good at land nav. Like during selection, I crushed it. But that one block like really shook my confidence where it's like, man, I have what it takes to do this. And so when I rolled back over and did that land nav portion again, I I was super nervous and like again kind of like shaky, but I also had like some fire underneath me where I was like I'm ready to rock, and I crushed it. Like I got all my points and finished ahead of time. And so it was really just like this, maybe the stars misaligned on that first one, or I don't know, maybe I practiced and was better the second time. But there was definitely some pressure, like, Chris, you better get your act together and perform like you should, because this is your last shot. And so, yeah, that was a little stressful.
Well, I was listening to an interview where you mentioned you want to be the calmest person in the room, right? The
Right.
calmest person. And I want to know, like, were you always calm? Your whole life was calm something that you developed when you were going through training and you're having, like, I put myself in a cold plunge because it puts me in a panic mode and I have to learn how
Right.
to calm myself down. So like I guess it would be like stress induced and stuff where you learn to be calm. So
Sure.
like was that something that you've always had, like a calm nature? Was it like through training?
No, I don't think I've always had a calm nature. I think growing up, when stressful situations would arise, I would for sure panic. I attribute a lot of kind of my approach to chaotic situations primarily to my training, and specifically to my medical training. They intentionally make things incredibly stressful and chaotic and miserable while you're trying to do medicine, and that's on purpose, because when you actually need to do real medicine, um, things aren't going to go the way you want them to, and you need to be able to think through the problem. And yeah, I think one of the best compliments I ever received. We were in Texas training up to get ready to head out to Afghanistan, and we were, again, this is just training, but we take down this kind of village and dealing with the bad guys that they put in the way. Somebody yells out medic, and so I run over there, and there's a guy that's injured, and it's myself and a PJ that are kind of starting to work on him, and we're kind of hunkered down in this one little room, and then they bring in another guy. Okay, so now we got two patients, and so we're starting to work through that. And the PJ and I both have the same sequence. It's like deal with certain things at certain times in a very logical way, no matter what the injury. And then a couple minutes later, another two guys come in. So now it's like we got four injured, and they just kept doing that. And we eventually had like eight patients, ranging from like minor wounds to like very serious, like probably going to die. Again, I want to reiterate, it's just training, but it was intentionally very stressful because they were overwhelming us and intentionally overwhelming our supplies. Like we were running out of supplies, and that was on purpose to see how we would react in that situation. So the PJ and I, Andre, we just kept going around to patient, going through that formula, that sequence, and working through the problem, checking the interventions that we had done it up until that point. And then we eventually got everybody out of there in the index, and it was a great day. Well, the compliment came the next day when we were working with the infantry guys that had been pulling security for us. And he says, "Dude, how did you stay so calm during that chaos?" And I didn't think about it, and I guess it came from the training. Like, I was so dialed into that formula that had been pounded into my head during medical training that it wasn't a chaotic situation. It was just a puzzle to solve with eight moving pieces that were bleeding and yelling. And so, because I had phenomenal training during SOCM, I could just fall back on that formula and just hit that formula every single time. And it's almost like I didn't have to panic because I knew what the next step was, no matter what the situation was in front of me. So,
I asked that question because learning how to control your emotions
yeah.
is something that I am working with. I'm
Mhm.
understanding. My family is always like, she's quick to react. And I want it. I'm curious for myself, like without that training, I mean, like I said, I'll do like cold plunge to calm my body down, stuff like that. What else can one do to be calm and stay calm in? Because something happens, like you don't want me on your team right now, and I want to be someone whose team you want to be on.
Right.
So I want to know, like, how can one train for staying calm and being calm?
Sure. I think there's a couple different approaches. Like obviously in a medical situation, if you have something like a formula to fall back on, it takes almost the thinking out of the equation, and so you don't have time to panic or be chaotic. It's just like, all right, what's the next step in the formula? Now, in something where you are consistently being reactive to maybe an emotional situation, like somebody said something that you don't like, and then you're quick to react, that can be practiced in the following way. Um, in all situations, positive, negative, neutral, before you say something, before you do something, pause, take a breath, think, then act in that order every single time. And the reason I say it every single time is if you can do it all the times where there isn't an emotional situation in front of you, it's just like a normal day. So you're just having a normal conversation with somebody. Um, you still get to practice that sequence and those steps. And so when the time comes where you are presented with something that's very frustrating or makes you angry or even sad or scared, you have that built-in practice where it's like, all right, I'm going to pause, take a breath, think, and then act. And in that split second, that moment that you separate um, your emotion from the reaction is where you can do a lot of thinking and a lot of planning and actually come up with the best next step and not just a reaction. That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I love how you mentioned like just, when you said just, it's, even though it was just training, but that translates to the field. And my family always makes fun of me because I'm like, you know, I'm like, shit hits the fan. I'm like, I went through civilian SEER. I'm like, I got a little bit, of experience to, help us survive if something happens. And they just laugh. They're like, that wasn't even real life. I was like, no, but it's as real as it's gonna get for me right now. Like,
Yeah.
and they just always laugh at the fact that, like, he's like, it was pretend, like you could have gone. How does the training like, was there ever moments in combat where you're like, my gosh, this training saved my life?
Good question. I personally am fortunate enough that like when I went to Afghanistan, we were closing down Kandahar, and so none of my guys got hurt. There was a couple instances where the enemy dropped rockets on the base, but the base at that point was mostly deserted, and so none of my guys were in a position where they were injured or hurt. I think the worst injury we got was a torn pec because he was benching too heavy. And so again, I consider myself incredibly lucky that even though I have a lot of training, I never had to use it with my friends. I'm incredibly grateful that none of my guys got hurt or were seriously injured while we were downrange. And so my story is interesting because like I signed up to go be a war hero, but I'm so grateful that I didn't have to use any of my training because if I'm the one that's doing the work, somebody's having a really bad day. Like you had Nick on your show not too long ago, and listening to his story, man, he had a really bad day, and I'm so incredibly grateful that none of my guys had to experience that, and I personally never had to experience that.
Did you get your master's? I don't know how long I listened to the interview, but you were going for philosophy, right? You're getting a
Yeah.
master's. Are you still doing that, or you got it?
Yeah, I was pursuing my master's in philosophy. I took a pause on it because business started kind of picking up, and I couldn't devote the time I wanted to that. It is something I want to pursue again because philosophy is probably my favorite subject because it's interesting.
Yeah, I find it very fascinating. I want to know, like, as we mentioned your business, and well, you mentioned it, and philosophy and combat. I want to know, like, all of those. Is there anything that tie in together, like lessons that you've learned in combat that translate to business that translates in philosophy in all of life and anything like that?
I think the biggest thing, and again, Nick talks, he and I's philosophy are very similar actually, but as you're navigating life, you have to have a desired end state in mind. And so you can relate that back to like mission planning. What's the commander's intent at the end of the day with this mission? Well, based on that intent, that's going to structure differently how you set up the events leading up to that moment. And it's the exact same way with life. It's like in 5 years, if I want to have achieved X, Y, Z, or a better question I typically ask my clients is like, tell me who you want to be, and then we'll start working on what you want to achieve. So I think identity is a huge part of that, and a big component of my training that I do with my clients. And so that if that's the desired end state, if that's the commander's intent of this kind of individual you're striving to become, that is now going to dictate all the events leading up to that 5 years down the road, and all the way down to like, all right, what am I doing today? If I want to be somebody that learns all the time, if I want to be somebody that's emotionally intelligent and patient, if I want to be somebody that's financially successful, then those desires are going to dictate what I do today. It's going to say, yep, I work out today, I eat well, I listen well, I don't just wait for my turn to talk. I devote a serious amount of time and energy towards growing the business that I'm trying to grow, because that's going to lead me towards that desired end state down the road. And so the military mindset of like, mission, planning the mission, execute the mission, it's very applicable in everyday life too. It's like, but I think oftentimes people don't know what that desired end state is for themselves. And so that as a result, they're just reacting to life as it shows up, as opposed to being proactive and dictating how their path lays out before them.
How can one be like proactive and kind of understand that and cultivate that identity?
Yeah. The 5 areas that I focus on when I work with folks are mental, physical, emotional, social, and financial. And each of those could have subcategories to it. But in my opinion, if you focus on those five, you're doing yourself a pretty solid service, because those are the heavy hitters. Now, how do you cultivate this identity? Well, it's you really have to ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be mentally? Who do I want to be mentally in 5 years? Or financially, who do I want to be? And and there's a distinction between who and what. The Oftentimes I ask people, who do you want to be in 5 years? And they start listing off things they want to accomplish or acquire. And I'm like, all right, that's great. We're going to save that for the goal setting section. Tell me what kind of man or woman you want to be first, because that is the value system on which everything is stacked. Sometimes we start chasing after goals and we get halfway there and we realize that it has nothing to do with what we actually want for our own life. We start chasing the Lamborghini or the McLaren, and we're saving up and we're working really hard, and we're like, actually all I wanted was a cabin in the woods and some peace and quiet. And so figuring out that value system first, that identity, that is going to make setting the goals way easier, because then you can adjust accordingly as you're progressing through. I'll tell you a quick story
Yeah.
about that exact thing. So my mental identity, the person I'm striving to become, is I am a constant learner. And for me, what that means is I'm constantly seeking out new information, new skills that I can apply to my life. And so the goal that I set that would align with that is I'll just read a book a week for 5 years. And so 52 books a year. And at first I was staying on track, and I was feeling pretty good about this particular goal. But then I started getting behind schedule. And as a result, I started feeling kind of guilt and shame, like, man, I just can't keep up. And then I got really behind schedule. Life happens and disrupts your routine. And as a result, I was just picking up whatever quick book I could find to just burn through as fast as possible, just to get my numbers back up. And I did that for a little while, and I realized that wasn't in alignment with the kind of man that I'm trying to become. If I'm trying to be a constant learner, the goal is to learn and acquire new skills. The goal isn't to just stack numbers of books that you've read to brag about later. And so I was able to, because I had that identity, that value system laid out first, I was able to adjust the goal to better align with that. And so now I'm significantly less concerned with the number of books I read and more concerned with the quality of book I read and how much I can retain from it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Can you there's a reason why I'm asking this question. Can you tell us the physical identity, please?
Yeah, sure. So mental is I'm a constant learner. Physical, I look good naked and I'm hard to kill. That's the person that I'm striving to become.
That's
And
I love that. It's I said after I listened to your interview, I said that to my family today, and I was like, that is a t-shirt right there. I'm like,
well, it's got some like it's intentionally kind of funny because it's easy to remember at that point, but it makes sense if you think about it. So
Mhm,
when you're looking at yourself in the mirror, if you're proud of what you see, if you look good naked, that is really a testament to your daily habits and actions over the course of your life.
mhm.
Because you cannot cram for fitness. You can't shove it in a weekend and be done with it. It's something that requires daily discipline over the long haul. And so in 5 years, if I look in the mirror and I'm still proud of what I see, that again is a testament to my discipline. The hard to kill part is a little bit of leftover residue from army days, but I think it's still applicable in the civilian world in that the healthier you are, the harder it is for life to kill you. And that includes, the more muscle mass you have on you, the harder it is to die in car wrecks. It's like the muscle protects you. The kind of foods that you put in your body affects your performance and your sleep and your ability to think clearly in the morning. All of it is connected. And so like if you can stay healthy, it's harder for life to take you out.
Yeah, there's a reason why I needed you to say it on this podcast. I'm like, I'm not letting him leave without saying that because it's relatable. It's so
Yeah.
relatable. And I feel like everyone um can relate to it and understand it. And
Yeah.
also it makes a lot of sense to know that in this instant gratification world,
Yeah.
that that is not something that is going to be instant. It's something you're going to be needing to work towards, and then you'll be able to see and understand the results of it all.
Yeah.
My coach
Exactly.
always said when we were in Team Eagle One of his like biggest things was you don't work this hard and not know who you are.
Right.
And it's, when you're putting out so much, you give yourself away either up and out to realize like this, like you mentioned, like this isn't the life for me. Like I don't want the Lamborghini, I want the cabin in the woods. And
Right.
you come to learn who you are. And the only way I really believe you get to learn who you are is by challenging yourself and going through those hard things because life isn't easy. It's
Yeah.
a constant struggle. Nobody has an easy life, no matter how you look at it. So by putting yourself through that, you really get to test who you are and learn about yourself and learn who you are. What do you have to share for other people to just put some simple things in place to strengthen their mindset, their discipline, to all that stuff?
Sure. I think discipline is a muscle that needs to be developed. And sometimes people tell me, Chris, I'm just not disciplined at all. Help me. And I immediately push back and I say, I bet you are disciplined. Do you brush your teeth every day? Well, yeah, I'm an adult. All right, then you are disciplined. It's just you've broken the task down small enough that you don't even think about it. It's just part of your daily routine. That's what discipline is. And so I'm I sometimes joke and say I'm like the opposite of David Goggins. I typically don't tell people to go run out for 100 miles in this freezing cold, but rather, particularly if they're just starting on their fitness journey, it's like, all right, do the thing that you can do every day that doesn't break you, that you can do consistently to build that habit. And if your goal is to ultimately run an Ironman competition, but you are a couch potato, start off by just walking around the block for 15 minutes. Do that every day because it's not going to hurt the next day. Because sometimes, like the fitness journey, it's like you get to the point where you're dreading going to the gym because you know the pain that follows it, and and if you're just starting out with something, you don't want to push through all the pain just to get to the desired end state. It's like if you're brand new at something, let's make it so fun and easy that you've developed that routine where it's like, all right, every day at 3 o'clock, I do exercise, which for me right now is just walking around the block. And eventually you build up to, all right, now I'm, running 5Ks every day or whatever. And then ultimately bodybuilding competition, whatever the case is. It's like, if you're a beginner, don't expect to perform at somebody's level who's been training for years and years. Start where you are and develop the habit. And I typically tell people to like save enough room in the tank where you're looking forward to the next workout or you're looking forward to the next thing. Because then you're associating exercise with I can't wait to do it again, or I'm looking forward to tackling it again. And then eventually, after you develop that habit, you can start really pushing yourself where it's like, all right, yeah, you're looking forward to the struggle. You're looking forward to being underneath the heavy load and the weights and the clang of the metal. And it's like, then you're starting to look forward to the pain because you know that's where the growth is. But you can't, it's hard to start there and then stay consistent there. So I usually try to make things super easy at the beginning.
It makes sense because what changed my life with starting Team Eagle One, it was just supposed to be one day of training. That was it. I
Yeah.
just wanted to see, like, I signed up for this kidnapping program. I like I'm a high maintenance. Like there was no way I was making it. And I was like, I need like someone to train me. So like I figured like a Navy SEAL, it was in my
Yeah.
mind. Found someone and I was like, just one day, just want to know if I had a strong mindset and I don't quit. And he said something in the middle of the training day, which I wanted to quit like 65,000 times from the moment I started. And
Right.
and he was like, if you think day one is hard, which it was, he was like, try day two,
Right.
because your mind is going to give you every logical excuse. They're all going to be logical on why you shouldn't show up again.
Right.
And it was because it was so painful. I mean, when I finished, it wasn't like euphoric high from working out. Like I
Right.
felt like I got run over by a truck. And then the next day was like paralyzed for 4 days. I couldn't
Right.
walk. I was like, why do I want to go back to this? And then because he said that though, I was like, I made it through day one. Like now this is all about testing my mindset. Can I make it to day two?
Right.
And I made it to day two and and then the rest was history. But, it makes a lot of sense on like, don't put yourself in that pain right away because you're going to hate it. And every single time you think about running or training or whatever, you're just going to think about that first day of pain and
Yep.
it's never going to get easier or better for you.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And how did you, as we wrap it up, how did you said you hated running. How did you do you still hate running? How did you like make it so you ran all the time and got
Sure.
through training?
Yes, I still hate running. We had a joke on our team. We used to say running breeds cowardice, so we just wouldn't do it. But leading up to the army, I knew it was necessary, and so it was a big part of my life. Ran every day and hated every minute. Um, and then once you get to the teams, it's a little bit different. Like it's like big boy rules. You get to train kind of how you want, pursuing things that you enjoy. Like some guys just want to be beefcakes. Some guys want to run marathons. And so their body types start to adjust a little bit. There's still sets of standards that we have to meet. And as long as you're meeting those standards, then you're good to go. But the running I enjoy, as we circle back to Frisbee, the running I enjoy is chasing after something. And so whenever I was in charge of doing PT for the team or whatever, it's like, all right, we're playing ultimate Frisbee today. And we'd line up on the teams. And as opposed to going for, a 45-minute run, we wind up sprinting for 45 minutes, which is, in my opinion, great for you. And it's significantly more fun. And that's the kind of running I don't mind doing because it's fast and it's active and it's, with an objective in mind and not just running in a circle because I just can't do that.
So the lesson is bring fun into what you hate. Is that accurate? Or
Exactly. There's no reason. I take that back. There are very few reasons why PT should suck on purpose. If the intent behind the PT session is to get in shape, there's no reason why it can't be a ton of fun. Now, having said that, sometimes it has to suck on purpose to maintain that mental resiliency, like pushing through the horribleness of a situation. That's important too. But I think that's a different aspect of the training. That's a mental aspect as opposed to, just staying in good physical shape.
And how do you push past that mental aspect?
I engage in a couple different things. So I took up jujitsu last year, and being repeatedly beat up by, wiry 16-year-olds as a former Green Beret is incredibly humbling and good for me. And so engaging in that has been great because there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to out muscle you, but now you're folding me into a pretzel and this is unfortunate. So there's that. I also do pretty long sauna sessions. For me, I used to joke with the guys, it's like sauna is the best cardio because I can just sit there and relax. But after an hour in the really hot heat, it's like, all right, it becomes a mental game where it's like, all right, how much longer can I last? Okay, timer says another 30 minutes. Let's do 35 or whatever the case is. And so that becomes kind of a mental exercise too. Plus it's good for your heart.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm gonna try the sauna one.
Yeah.
Because that I like sitting there and just doing nothing. Thanks for being a guest on my podcast, Mindset Lessons from the Field. It was really fun talking with you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was my absolute pleasure. Love to do it again.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks everyone who's listening. Please go like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Patreon member so you can get full access to our bonus episodes and extra goodies that only our Patreons get. Tune in next week for our next episode. And thank you so much for listening to the show. Bye.